The little girl sat on a small wooden stool in front of her old piano, her fingers lightly resting on the keys. The instrument had seen better days, with a few scratches on its surface and a few keys that sometimes stuck, but it was hers, and it carried the sounds of her dreams. She had discovered her love for the piano when she was very young, fascinated by the way pressing the keys could make the room fill with music. Every day she practiced for hours, not because anyone asked her to, but because she loved it. Her house was simple, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other. The walls were decorated with drawings she had made, and there was a small table in the corner where she kept her music books. Sometimes, she would play by ear, letting her heart guide her hands, and other times, she would carefully follow the notes on the page. Either way, she always put everything she had into her music. One afternoon, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was from someone she had never met, someone important, someone who could open doors she had only dreamed about. The letter said that a CEO from a large company wanted to hear her play, that her music had been described as extraordinary, and that it might move people in ways words could not. She didn't fully understand why someone so important would want to hear her, but she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She spent the next few days preparing. She practiced her favorite pieces over and over again, making sure every note was perfect. But no matter how much she practiced, a small worry lingered in her mind. What if she made a mistake? What if the music didn't touch anyone? She had played in front of her family and neighbors before, but this was different. This was someone who had seen and done so much more than anyone she knew. On the day the CEO was to arrive, the house felt unusually quiet. The girl's parents were there, offering gentle encouragement. They had always supported her, but even they seemed a little nervous. The little girl took a deep breath, sat on the stool, and placed her hands on the keys. She could feel her heart beating fast, but she tried to focus on the music, on the sound that would come out of her fingers. When the CEO entered, the girl looked up for a brief moment. The person standing there was tall, dressed formally, with an expression that seemed both curious and serious. The little girl quickly looked back at the piano, trying not to be distracted. She started playing softly, letting her fingers find their way across the keys. The room was small, but the music seemed to fill it completely. At first, the CEO watched quietly, almost as if trying to understand what was happening. The music was not loud or flashy, but there was something in it that felt genuine and pure. It was as if the little girl was speaking through the piano, telling a story without words. Each note carried emotion. Each melody seemed to have a heartbeat of its own. The girl played a piece she had composed herself. She had stayed up late for several nights, carefully working on it, making sure it expressed everything she wanted to say. As she played, she forgot about her worries. She forgot about the important visitor in the room. All that existed was the music, the piano, and the feelings she poured into every note. The CEO's eyes softened as the music went on. There were moments when the melody rose and fell, delicate and strong at the same time. It was impossible not to feel something watching her play. The little girl noticed that the CEO seemed moved, though she didn't understand why. She only knew that the music was coming from her heart, and that was all that mattered. The piece ended, and for a few seconds there was silence. The little girl looked up, unsure of what would happen next. Then, she saw the CEO's expression change. A smile appeared, but it was mixed with tears. The CEO reached for a handkerchief, quietly wiping away a tear, clearly touched by what had just been played. The girl felt a mixture of relief and amazement. She had never imagined that her music could affect someone so deeply. The CEO spoke softly, praising the girl's talent. It was not just about how well she played, but about the feeling behind each note. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The little girl listened, realizing that her hours of practice, her love for the piano, and her determination had been noticed and appreciated by someone she had never met before. After the performance, the CEO asked to hear more pieces, and the little girl happily obliged. Each piece was different, some happy, some sad, some playful. The CEO listened attentively, occasionally nodding and smiling, clearly enjoying the journey that the music was taking them on. The girl felt proud but also humble, knowing that the music had created a connection without any words. The visit lasted longer than expected. The CEO asked questions about how the girl learned to play, where she got her inspiration, and what she hoped to do in the future. She answered honestly, sharing her dreams of playing on bigger stages, reaching more people with her music, and never stopping her practice. The CEO listened carefully, clearly impressed by not just the talent, but the determination and honesty of the young musician. Before leaving, the CEO spoke about opportunities and ways to support the girl's talent. It was not just praise. It was a promise that her music could go beyond the small living room, that it could touch more hearts, and that she could have guidance and resources to grow further. The little girl felt a sense of hope she had never felt before. Her dream, once distant, now seemed closer than ever. After the CEO left, the girl sat back at her piano, reflecting on what had happened. The house felt quiet again, but now it felt different. The piano keys under her fingers seemed to glow with possibility. She realized that the music she loved so much could do more than fill a room. It could reach people in ways she had only imagined. Her parents smiled at her, proud but also emotional. They had always known their daughter had something special, but seeing someone so important moved by her music was a moment they would never forget. They encouraged her to continue practicing, to keep dreaming, and to always play from her heart. That night, the girl stayed at her piano a little longer than usual. She tried out new melodies, experimented with harmonies, and imagined the places her music could go. The memory of the CEO's tears stayed with her, a reminder that music was not just notes and rhythm, but emotion, connection, and the ability to touch lives. From that day on, the little girl practiced with renewed energy. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks, but she also knew that her music mattered. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was her voice, her way of communicating with the world, and a bridge to hearts she had never met. As she played, she imagined the people who might one day hear her music, the emotions they might feel, and the stories they could share. Every note was a step forward, every melody a step closer to the dream she had nurtured since she first touched the keys. And in that small house, with the old piano that had seen her through so many days, the little girl played on, her heart full of hope and her hands full of music. After the CEO had left, the little girl could not stop thinking about the visit. Every time she sat at her piano, she remembered the way the person had listened, the soft smile, the tears that had quietly fallen. She felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She wanted to get better, to practice more, to make sure that the next time she played, her music would be even more powerful. The next few days were full of energy and excitement. She woke up early, ran to the piano, and played until her fingers ached. She tried different melodies, mixing fast and slow notes, soft and loud passages, and imagined how each piece could tell a story. She wanted the music to be alive, not just notes on a page. Sometimes she would close her eyes and feel the music flow through her, imagining she was speaking to someone far away without words. Her parents noticed the change in her. She was more focused and determined, but also calmer in a way. The music had become more than a hobby. It was a part of her, a way to express what she could not say with words. They encouraged her to continue, sometimes sitting quietly to listen as she practiced. Her father would gently nod, and her mother would quietly smile, feeling proud that their daughter's talent was growing in such a meaningful way. At school, the girl was still quiet and polite, but she carried a new confidence. Her classmates noticed it too. Some asked her to play during breaks or at small school events. She always agreed, but inside she kept thinking about the CEO's visit. She wondered if one day she would have the chance to play for more people, maybe even for audiences much larger than she could imagine. One afternoon, her music teacher, who had guided her since the beginning, visited her house. The teacher had heard about the CEO's reaction and was excited to see the girl's progress. They sat together at the piano, and the teacher began to offer gentle advice, helping her improve her technique and encouraging her to explore new kinds of music. The girl listened carefully, absorbing every word, every suggestion, eager to learn and grow. The teacher introduced her to a few more challenging pieces, ones that required patience and focus. At first, the girl struggled, but she remembered the feeling of moving the CEO with her music. That memory gave her determination. She practiced slowly, breaking down the difficult parts until she could play them smoothly. With each success, her confidence grew, and her music became richer and more expressive. News of her talent started to spread. Some neighbors came to listen, drawn by the stories they had heard. They were impressed not just by her skill, but by the way her music seemed to communicate feelings. Each person who listened left quietly, moved in their own way. Some would later tell friends about the little girl who could make anyone feel something through the piano. The girl, however, stayed humble, knowing that the music was more about the feeling than the applause. One evening there was another visit. This time, the CEO returned, wanting to hear more of her music. The little girl felt her stomach tighten with nerves, but she took a deep breath and sat at the piano. The CEO entered quietly, watching as she positioned her fingers on the keys. Then, without saying a word, she began to play. The music started gently, almost like a whisper, and gradually built into a story of joy, hope, and longing. As she played, the CEO listened closely, captivated. Each note seemed carefully chosen, full of emotion. It was clear that the little girl had spent hours refining her pieces. The melodies told stories of dreams, of challenges, of quiet moments of reflection. The CEO felt the power of the music, remembering moments from their own life that suddenly felt alive again. The connection between the music and the listener was profound, as if they were sharing something beyond words. During the performance, the girl's fingers moved faster at times, slower at others, carefully balancing the emotions of each piece. She experimented with dynamics, playing softly, then loudly, then softly again, letting the music breathe. The CEO's eyes filled with tears once more, touched by the depth of feeling. The girl noticed this but stayed focused, understanding that the emotions were part of the music, part of the story she was telling. After she finished, the CEO applauded softly, letting the sound echo in the small room. There was no need for words. The applause itself was a recognition of the connection that had been made. The little girl felt a mix of relief and pride. She had shared her music, her emotions, and her heart, and it had reached someone else in a meaningful way. The CEO spoke about the importance of nurturing talent, about how rare it was to find someone who could express so much through music at such a young age. They discussed opportunities for the girl to attend special classes, meet other musicians, and perhaps perform in larger venues. The little girl listened carefully, absorbing every suggestion and promise. She felt a sense of hope and possibility she had never experienced before. Over the next few weeks, she continued to practice, incorporating the new advice and techniques she had learned. She explored different styles of music, from classical to more modern melodies, always focusing on making the music tell a story. Her fingers became stronger and more agile, her expression more confident, and her ability to convey emotion through the piano grew with each passing day. The girl also learned the importance of patience and persistence. Some pieces were difficult, requiring hours of repetition. Some days, she would feel frustrated, her fingers unable to keep up with her imagination. But she remembered the moments when her music had moved someone deeply, and that gave her the strength to continue. She learned that true skill was not just about talent, but about dedication and love for the craft. Her family continued to support her, sometimes listening, sometimes giving gentle encouragement, sometimes simply letting her be. They understood that this was more than practice. It was a journey of growth, emotion, and self-discovery. The house was often filled with music, a soundtrack to the girl's dreams and ambitions, and it brought a warmth and joy to the small home. Word of her talent began to reach beyond the neighborhood. A local newspaper ran a short story about the little girl who had moved a CEO with her piano. The story inspired others, showing how talent, passion, and dedication could have a real impact. The girl read the article carefully, feeling both surprised and encouraged. She did not play for recognition, but it was nice to know that others could feel the emotions she put into her music. The visits from the CEO became more regular, but never overwhelming. Each time, the little girl felt nervous and excited. She prepared carefully, wanting to share her best work. But over time, she began to feel more comfortable, realizing that the connection was about honesty and feeling, not perfection. The CEO, in turn, encouraged her to be herself, to let the music come naturally, and to trust her instincts. Through all this, the girl's love for the piano never faded. She continued to practice for the sheer joy of playing, to explore new sounds, to challenge herself, and to connect with her own feelings. Music was no longer just a pastime. It had become her language, her way of understanding the world and sharing that understanding with others. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the first time she had heard the CEO's reaction, the surprise, the tears, and the encouragement. She realized that music had the power to touch lives, to bridge gaps, and to bring people together in ways she had never imagined. The piano keys under her fingers were no longer just black and white. They were the keys to possibility, emotion, and connection. With that thought, she began to play a new melody, one she had been creating in her mind for days. The notes flowed freely, each one carrying a part of her story, her dreams, and her hopes. She played with energy and care, letting the music tell the tale she had been keeping in her heart. As the melody filled the room, she felt a sense of purpose and joy, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey that could reach far beyond her small neighborhood, touching hearts and inspiring others along the way. The little girl's world had changed in ways she could hardly explain. Each morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose, eager to sit at her piano and explore new melodies. The lessons from her teacher, the encouragement from her parents, and the visits from the CEO had given her a new understanding of what music could do. It was not just notes or rhythms. It was a way to express emotions that words could never capture. One rainy afternoon, she sat by the window, looking at the drops sliding down the glass while her fingers hovered over the keys. She had a feeling that today, something special would happen. The music she played that day was different, softer at first, almost like a whisper, then growing stronger and more confident. Each note carried a story, a memory, a feeling she wanted to share with anyone who might listen. She played slowly, letting the music breathe, and imagined the people it might reach, even if they were far away. Her parents sat quietly nearby, listening. They had become accustomed to the hours she spent at the piano, but today they sensed that her music had reached a new level. There was something in the way she played, a depth and emotion that seemed to touch them even more than before. They watched as she closed her eyes, lost in the music, and felt a pride that was hard to put into words. It was not just her skill. It was the way she made the piano speak for her. That evening, a small group of neighbors came by to hear her play. They had heard the stories and wanted to see the little girl who had moved someone so important. She welcomed them warmly, a little shy at first, but soon she was lost in her music. She played pieces she had composed herself, melodies full of hope, joy, and quiet reflection. Each person in the room felt a connection to the music, some nodding along, some closing their eyes, and some with tears forming quietly. The little girl noticed but did not stop. She knew that this was the power of her music, to reach hearts in ways nothing else could. A week later, the CEO called again, asking to hear more of her music. The little girl felt nervous but excited. She had prepared several new pieces, each one different, each one expressing a part of her heart. When the CEO arrived, she greeted them politely and then sat at the piano, her fingers poised and ready. As she began to play, the music seemed to fill the room with warmth and life. The melodies carried feelings of childhood memories, dreams, challenges, and victories. The CEO listened quietly, captivated by the authenticity and emotion in every note. As the performance went on, the little girl noticed how the music affected the CEO. There were moments of reflection, moments of joy, and moments when tears quietly fell. She did not stop to look. She knew that the music itself was communicating everything. She felt a deep connection, realizing that even without words, She could tell a story that someone else could understand and feel. This realization made her play with even more care and attention, letting each note flow naturally and freely. The CEO spoke softly after the performance, praising her not just for her skill, but for the emotions she conveyed. They spoke about the uniqueness of her talent, the dedication it required, and the potential she had to inspire others. The little girl listened carefully, feeling both proud and humble. She knew that this was not about fame or recognition. It was about the ability to touch lives, to share what she felt inside through her music. Inspired by the visit, she began to write more original pieces. Each new composition was a reflection of her experiences, her dreams, and her observations of the world around her. Sometimes, she wrote music about the quiet moments at home, sometimes about the bustling streets outside, and sometimes about her own emotions. Happiness, sadness, curiosity, and hope. She discovered that music could be a diary of the soul, a way to understand herself and the world. Her teacher introduced her to more challenging techniques, showing her how to add depth and complexity to her pieces. At first, it was difficult, and there were moments when she wanted to give up. But she remembered the first time she had played for the CEO, the way the music had moved someone, and that memory pushed her forward. She practiced patiently, slowly mastering each technique, until her music became richer and more expressive. She realized that every challenge she overcame made her music stronger, just as every emotion she expressed made it more meaningful. The little girl also began to understand the importance of listening. She would sometimes close her eyes and play, imagining different scenarios, different audiences, and different emotions. She noticed how the smallest change in tempo or volume could change the feeling of a piece. She experimented, trying new rhythms, softer notes, louder chords, and subtle pauses. With each experiment, she learned more about how to communicate through music, how to make it speak in ways that words never could. As her skill grew, so did her confidence. She started to perform for larger groups, sometimes in small school gatherings, sometimes for community events. Each performance was different, each audience had a unique reaction, and she learned to adapt and connect with each group. She discovered that the power of music was not in playing perfectly but in playing with sincerity, with heart, and with a willingness to share herself through each note. The visits from the CEO became a source of guidance and encouragement. They shared stories of their own life experiences, the challenges they had faced, and how art and music had helped them through difficult times. The little girl listened, absorbing the lessons, and realized that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, resilience, and the ability to understand others were equally important. The CEO's presence was not just about recognition. It was about mentorship, showing her that her music could have a lasting impact if nurtured with care. One day, she composed a piece that was particularly emotional. She had spent hours trying to capture a feeling she could not put into words. When she played it for the CEO, the person was deeply moved, quietly wiping tears away as the music unfolded. The little girl felt a mix of emotions herself: pride, joy, and a profound understanding of how music could connect souls. She realized that her piano was not just an instrument. It was a bridge between hearts, a way to reach people beyond words. Her family noticed the changes too. She became more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the feelings of others. The music had taught her empathy, the ability to listen and respond, not just with notes, but with emotion. The house was often filled with melodies, each one telling a story, each one carrying a part of her heart. Her parents felt a quiet pride, knowing that their daughter was growing into someone who could inspire and move others with her talent. The little girl's daily routine became a rhythm of its own. Mornings were for practice, afternoons for exploring new compositions, and evenings for reflection and listening. She learned to balance dedication with rest, understanding that creativity flowed best when the mind and heart were calm. She experimented with different styles, blending traditional pieces with her own unique ideas. Each experiment added depth to her music, making it more versatile and expressive. Over time, the girl began to imagine her music reaching far beyond her home and neighborhood. She thought about performing in bigger halls, sharing her compositions with more people, and inspiring other young musicians. The thought excited her, but it did not make her rush. She knew that every note she played, every piece she composed, was a step forward, a preparation for the opportunities that lay ahead. One afternoon, after finishing a particularly challenging piece, she sat back and listened to the echoes of her music in the room. She reflected on how far she had come, from the nervous child playing in her small living room to the young musician capable of moving even the most experienced listener. She felt a sense of calm and joy, knowing that the journey was ongoing, that there were more stories to tell, more emotions to explore, and more hearts to touch. The CEO had become more than just a visitor. They were a mentor and a friend. They encouraged her to keep exploring, to take risks in her music, and to never lose the sincerity that made her playing so special. The little girl listened and followed their guidance, understanding that while talent opened doors, passion, dedication, and emotion kept them open. Through all this, she never lost sight of why she played the piano in the first place. It was not for recognition, not for applause, but for the joy of creating, the ability to share feelings, and the power to connect with others. Every note she played carried a piece of her heart, and she learned that the true beauty of music was in its ability to touch lives, to inspire, and to remind people of the emotions that make life meaningful. The little girl's story continued to unfold, each day bringing new lessons, new melodies, and new connections. Her piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a part of her, a companion on a journey that promised to reach far beyond the walls of her small home. She played with confidence, with love, and with the understanding that music was not just sound. It was life, emotion, and the bridge between hearts that words could never fully build. The little girl had begun to feel the world opening up before her, and each day brought new experiences that shaped her music and her understanding of life. Her piano practice remained central, but now it was accompanied by opportunities she had never imagined. The visits from the CEO had become more meaningful, offering guidance, encouragement, and new ideas for how she could grow as a musician and as a person. One morning, she received a letter inviting her to perform at a local community event. It was a small stage in a park, but the invitation was an important step. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unsure how her music would be received by a larger audience. Her parents offered reassurance, reminding her that she had always played from her heart, and that was what mattered most. She practiced diligently, preparing her pieces, imagining the audience listening, and feeling the emotions she wanted to convey. On the day of the event, the park was filled with families, children running around, and the sound of laughter blending with the rustle of leaves. The little girl carried her music sheets and sat at the small piano provided on the stage. She took a deep breath, feeling the warm sunlight on her face, and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but as she continued, confidence filled her. She let the music tell its story, her fingers moving skillfully across the keys. The audience grew quiet, drawn in by the melodies. Some closed their eyes, some swayed gently to the rhythm, and some smiled, feeling the emotions conveyed in every note. The little girl noticed the reactions and felt a quiet joy. She understood that her music was creating a connection, that people could feel the story she was telling even without words. Her nerves faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. After her performance, several people approached her, praising her talent and expressing how deeply they had been moved. She listened politely, feeling grateful but humble. She realized that this was not about seeking approval, but about sharing something meaningful. The feedback encouraged her, showing her that her music had the power to touch hearts, inspire thought, and create memorable experiences. The CEO was present at the event, quietly watching from the side. After the performance, they approached her, smiling and offering words of praise. They spoke about how her growth as a musician was remarkable and how she had managed to touch so many lives in a single performance. The little girl felt proud but also understood that the journey was ongoing. There was still so much to learn, explore, and express. Following the event, the girl began composing new pieces inspired by the people she had met and the experiences she had observed. She would watch the interactions in her neighborhood, listen to conversations, and notice the way people moved, laughed, or struggled. All of this became part of her music. Each melody was a reflection of her growing awareness of the world, capturing moments of joy, sorrow, hope, and resilience. Her teacher continued to guide her, introducing more complex compositions and advanced techniques. The girl embraced the challenge, understanding that mastering these skills would allow her to express her emotions even more fully. She practiced tirelessly, learning how to blend emotion with technical precision. The combination of creativity and discipline became her new focus, and her music started to gain a depth that was noticeable to anyone who listened. One afternoon, she was invited to play for a small gathering of local musicians. They were curious to hear a young talent that had already begun to make waves in the community. The little girl felt a flutter of nerves but remembered her past experiences. She sat at the piano and began to play. The other musicians watched attentively, occasionally exchanging glances that showed their admiration. When she finished, there was quiet applause and nods of respect. She realized that her music could communicate across ages and backgrounds, creating connections even with those who were experienced and skilled. The CEO continued to play a supportive role, offering advice on not just music but life. They discussed the importance of perseverance, patience, and understanding the impact of one's actions. The girl absorbed these lessons, realizing that her journey was not just about playing the piano, but about becoming someone who could inspire and positively influence others. She began to understand that her talent carried responsibility, the responsibility to use it wisely and with compassion. As her reputation grew, she began receiving invitations to perform at slightly larger events. She performed at schools, local halls, and small community centers. Each event brought new audiences, each performance a new opportunity to connect and express. She learned to read the room, understanding when to play softly, when to emphasize certain notes, and how to convey emotion without overdoing it. The subtlety and skill of her performances became part of her growing artistry. Alongside her public performances, she continued her private practice and composition. Some days, she would simply experiment with sounds, creating new patterns, exploring different harmonies, and discovering the emotional power of unexpected notes. She began to write down her compositions, carefully notating each melody so she could share it with others. This process of documentation helped her refine her work and allowed her music to reach beyond her immediate surroundings. Her family remained her constant support. They attended every performance they could, encouraged her during difficult practice sessions, and celebrated her achievements without letting her become complacent. They understood that her journey was about growth, learning, and expression, not fame. Their love and encouragement provided a stable foundation, allowing her to take risks and explore her creativity with confidence. One evening, after a long day of practice, she received a call from a music academy in a nearby city. They had heard about her performances and were impressed by the depth of emotion in her playing. They invited her to attend special workshops and mentorship sessions to help her develop her skills further. The little girl was thrilled but also nervous. It meant stepping into a bigger world, leaving the comfort of her familiar surroundings, and meeting new people. Yet, she also felt ready, knowing that her music had already opened doors, and that she had the determination to embrace new challenges. The CEO encouraged her to accept the opportunity, reminding her that talent combined with dedication could take her far. They emphasized that growth often required stepping outside one's comfort zone, and that her passion and sincerity would guide her. The little girl agreed, feeling both excited and motivated. She packed her music sheets, her notebooks, and a few personal belongings, preparing for the workshops that promised to expand her horizons. During her first days at the academy, she met other young musicians from different backgrounds. They shared their experiences, techniques, and compositions. The little girl listened, learned, and shared her own music. She discovered that despite differences in style and experience, the love for music connected everyone. The environment was challenging, but it inspired her to push her boundaries, experiment with new ideas, and take her performances to another level. At the end of the workshop, she was asked to perform a piece she had been working on for the group. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement but sat at the piano and let her fingers tell the story. The music flowed naturally, reflecting her journey, her growth, and her experiences. The audience, consisting of fellow students and mentors, was captivated. They responded with applause, appreciation, and thoughtful comments. The little girl felt proud but also understood that this was just one step in her ongoing journey. Returning home, she reflected on the experiences she had gained. The visits from the CEO, the community performances, the workshops, and the new friends she had made all contributed to her growth. She realized that music was more than playing notes. It was about connecting, learning, and sharing life through sound. Every melody carried a piece of her story, and each performance allowed her to reach hearts and minds in ways she had only dreamed of. Her confidence grew, but she remained humble, remembering the days when she practiced quietly at home, unsure of what her future would hold. She learned that talent could open doors, but dedication, perseverance, and a willingness to share one's heart were what made the music truly powerful. The little girl knew that she had a responsibility to nurture her gift and use it to inspire, comfort, and connect with others. As the sun set each evening, she would sit by her piano, playing new pieces or refining old ones. Her fingers moved skillfully, guided by years of practice and the emotions she wanted to express. She thought about the people she had touched with her music, the lessons she had learned, and the possibilities that lay ahead. Each note was a promise to herself, a commitment to continue growing, and a hope that her music would continue to reach and move others, no matter where life took her. The little girl had grown into a young musician whose passion and talent had carried her far beyond what she had once imagined. The journey from her small living room, where she first played on an old piano, to stages filled with audiences of all ages, had shaped her not only as a musician but as a person. She had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of dedication, and she knew that her music could touch hearts in ways words never could. Her days were filled with practice, composition, and performances. She continued to explore new styles, combining classical techniques with her own unique ideas. Each piece she created told a story, whether of joy, sorrow, hope, or reflection. She understood that music was not just sound but a bridge between people, capable of conveying emotions that could not be expressed in any other way. Her piano had become an extension of her own voice, and every note she played carried a piece of her heart. The mentorship she received from the CEO had played a vital role in her growth. They continued to offer advice and encouragement, helping her navigate opportunities and challenges. Their guidance taught her not only about music but about life, the value of perseverance, the importance of staying humble, and the impact one could have on others by sharing their talents sincerely. The girl realized that her journey was not just personal. It was about inspiring and uplifting those around her. She began to mentor younger students, teaching them not only the mechanics of the piano but also how to express themselves through music. She encouraged them to practice with patience, to listen with their hearts, and to find their own unique voices. Through teaching, she discovered a new dimension of her music, the ability to inspire and guide others, passing on the lessons she had learned. The joy she felt when a student finally mastered a difficult piece reminded her of her own journey and motivated her to continue growing. Her family remained her foundation. They attended her performances, celebrated her achievements, and provided quiet support during challenging times. They had seen her evolve from a shy, nervous child into a confident and expressive musician. Their pride was matched by their understanding that her success was the result of her dedication, not just talent. They continued to nurture her, reminding her to stay true to herself and to always play from the heart. As her reputation grew, she was invited to perform at larger events, including charity concerts, community festivals, and local cultural gatherings. Each performance brought new audiences, each audience a new opportunity to connect and share her music. She learned to adapt her playing to different spaces, from intimate rooms to larger halls, always maintaining the authenticity and emotion that defined her style. She understood that every performance was a chance to touch lives, and that her responsibility as a musician extended beyond personal achievement. One evening, She was asked to perform at a prestigious event for influential community leaders and artists. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves, knowing that her audience would include people with experience and expertise in music. She prepared diligently, selecting pieces that reflected her growth, her experiences, and the emotions she wanted to convey. When the night arrived, she took her place at the grand piano, feeling the weight of the moment but also the familiar comfort of her music. As she played, the audience was captivated. Each note flowed with sincerity and passion, telling stories of childhood dreams, struggles, victories, and hope. Some listeners closed their eyes, absorbing the melodies. Others nodded or smiled quietly, moved by the emotional depth of the performance. The little girl, now a young woman, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her music had the power to connect people across backgrounds and experiences, to evoke emotions that were universal and timeless. After the performance, many approached her to express their admiration and gratitude. They spoke about how her music had touched them, reminded them of lost memories, or inspired them to pursue their own passions. She listened with humility, understanding that while recognition was meaningful, the true reward was knowing that her music had made a difference. She thanked them politely, feeling a quiet pride that was both satisfying and motivating. The CEO, present at the event, congratulated her warmly. They spoke about how far she had come, how she had grown as a musician, and how her dedication and authenticity had made her performances unforgettable. They reminded her that talent combined with sincerity could create lasting impact and encouraged her to continue exploring, composing, and performing. The young musician felt grateful for the guidance that had supported her journey and for the opportunities that had shaped her growth. In the weeks that followed, she continued to perform, compose, and mentor. She embraced each new challenge, understanding that growth was a continuous process. She experimented with different styles, collaborated with other musicians, and sought to reach broader audiences. Her music became a reflection not only of her talent but also of her experiences, emotions, and the people she met along the way. One day, she composed a particularly emotional piece, inspired by the people she had encountered and the journeys she had witnessed. It was a melody filled with hope, resilience, and reflection. When she performed it for a small audience, including some young students she mentored, she noticed the reactions. Smiles, tears, and attentive listening. She realized that her music had the power to connect generations, to teach, to comfort, and to inspire. Her success did not make her complacent. She continued to practice daily, exploring new techniques, refining her compositions, and deepening her understanding of music. She understood that the path of a musician required constant effort, creativity, and emotional honesty. Each day offered an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to share her gift with the world. Her family remained by her side, proud but always encouraging her to remain humble and focused. They had witnessed her transformation and understood that her music was a part of who she was. Their support, combined with the mentorship she had received, provided a foundation that allowed her to pursue her dreams without losing sight of her values or the joy of playing. Over time, the young musician became a source of inspiration for many. Her story, from the small living room to larger stages, showed that talent, when combined with dedication, sincerity, and passion, could have a profound impact. She reminded others that beginnings did not define potential, and that the courage to follow one's passion could lead to unexpected and beautiful journeys. She continued to perform, teach, and compose, always remembering the moments that had shaped her. The first time she had moved the CEO with her music, the small neighborhood performances, the workshops, and the experiences that had tested and strengthened her. Each memory was a part of her music, each lesson a step forward. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there were always new melodies to explore, new emotions to convey, and new connections to make. As she played each evening, she thought about the people who might hear her music in the future, the emotions it could evoke, and the lives it could touch. She felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose, knowing that her piano was not just an instrument but a bridge between hearts. She realized that her music had the power to inspire hope, bring comfort, and create lasting memories, and that this power came from the love and dedication she poured into every note. Her story became a symbol of perseverance, passion, and the transformative power of music. She continued to explore her creativity, perform with sincerity, and mentor young musicians who reminded her of herself. Through every performance, every composition, and every interaction, she shared not just music but a piece of her heart, touching lives in ways she had once only dreamed of. In the quiet moments, sitting at her piano, she reflected on how far she had come. From a little girl practicing on an old piano in a small living room to a young musician inspiring others, her journey was a testament to the power of dreams, hard work, and the courage to follow one's passion. She smiled, knowing that the music she created would continue to move hearts, and that her journey, though filled with challenges, had brought joy, growth, and connection in ways she had never imagined. And so, she played on, every note a story, every melody a bridge, and every performance a reminder that music, when shared with love and sincerity, could touch lives and change the world in small but meaningful ways. Her piano had become her voice, her music her legacy, and her journey a testament to the beauty of following one's dreams with courage and heart.